Arthur is our king. The long dark age of despair is ended, and we raise our voices to shout and sing that God has our great request now granted. Though he be but a youth, we can all see the marks of kingship in his beaming face. If ever the man were the progeny of the late Uther, Arthur has the grace. Look, he emerges on the balcony, the sword pulled from stone held in his hand. He waves, smiles at the people who believe there aloft the king of Britain does stand. Sound horn, call out the news, Arthur is our king. Let us raise our voices to shout and sing. And if you were paying attention, that was a sonic. Sound Horn is the collection I'm working on of Arthur poems, Legends of King Arthur. I'm influenced, obviously, by Malory and a bunch of the French romances that I've read in translation. Tennyson, John Heath Stubbs, a 20th century poet, came up with a collection called Arthurian in 1972, and especially Charles Williams. One of the things I've taken from Williams is the use of the Welsh poet Taliesin as a character who kind of tells the story here and there. In the poems I've written so far, I've focused not on the battles so much and not on the great epic things, but on relationships, fathers and sons, Uther and Arthur. Uther is not much of a father. He's kind of absent from Arthur's life. Arthur and Mordred. If you know the story, enough said. Lovers and beloveds, Lancelot, Guinevere, Tristan and Isolde, Lamorak and Morgause, and some others probably along the way that I haven't written about. The focus I've been trying to do is on the rise and then the fall of the kingdom, the promise and the failure of it, in large part because of all the love that got in the way. I started out using traditional poetry forms and structures. There's one free verse poem in the collection so far, and that's by Mordred because he's the villain. He gets to do a free verse. Some of it's blank verse. I've got some sonnets and villanelles and rhyming couplets in sort of iambic pentameter. I've got one comic poem and some other stanzaic forms I've been working on trying to create some my own stanza forms to kind of vary things, because everything's the same. In the sequence, before the poem that I just, where they just have announced Arthur as king, one of the scenes that has stood out to me when I've worked with the Arthurian Legends material is that while Uther's alive, before his son is born, before his son is even conceived, he has a vision of a dragon. So this is called the dragon. As the sun set over the plain, Uther paused, his sword clenched in his bloody fist, his heart racing as he again knew victory in battle. And then Merlin stood beside him, leaning on staff, and remaining silent a long while before he spoke. Your sword has bled every inch of British soil in your endless quest for lordship over all men. That is my task, said King Uther. That's who I am. I'm a man of war, always, if men fight me. But war does not cause men to love the one they fear. Merlin spoke quietly to him, lest he stir wrath. But your labor in battle will, some distant day, result in British unity, from Kent to Wales, when your son shall rule in your place. Uther laughed. Old man, you speak folly, he said. I have no son. Merlin sighed. The king lacked faith, and without faith, the present remains as bleak as the future. He stretched out his staff to the sky and shouted, Look! The king gazed toward the setting sun and saw wonders. A giant red dragon roared out from the clouds and hurtled across the heavens toward the two men, its wings flapping, its jaws open, flame pouring forth. What's the meaning of this trick? Shouted Uther into the roar of the oncoming serpent fury. It is no trick, replied Merlin, never afraid, as the crimson monster circled and flew back west. This is the sign you asked for, the sign of hope. The son who follows you as king will reign with fire. With his sword will come lasting peace, with peace, safety. When his reign ends, he will go west to lands unknown, where he will heal of his deep wounds for many years, before returning to this land to restore all things. I want to believe, said Uther, but I'm unsure how all these things will come to pass. Merlin sighed again. Nothing's as stubborn as skeptics who prefer doubt. He waved his staff at King Uther, who backed away. I can't convince one who refuses to believe what my skill in his eyes have shown him. But from this day you will always be reminded of my promise when you see what is now written on your armor." King Uther looked, and a dragon lay sprawled across his gleaming silver shield. He knew the sign, and thenceforth fought as Pendragon, the Serpent King. In the shadows Merlin waited and bided time until the king begot a son, and our tale begins. In my life, I've never heard of such a thing as someone's bastard being crowned a king. Even if he's Uther's son, as he claims, that's no point of pride, no right of name. For who was Uther when all was said and done, but a scoundrel and a tyrant, if there ever was one? Some will say he was a good king. Those who say that are ignorant of everything. Some will say he brought us peace. Uther was a man of war who never ceased to pursue his rivals with the edge of his sword whenever he grew restless or bored. Most recently, he lusted after the duke's wife, so he besieged his castle and took his life. A man of peace. Ha! Uther sought war because that was what he believed a king was for. He drove us into battles we could ill afford, and when the fight was over, where was our reward? A good king gives generous gifts to his men, and when he's done, he gives gifts again. But Uther taxed the harvests of our lands, he grasped the gold out of our hands, and it was his father, but a petty lord who also stole from us what heaven outpoured. Don't talk to me about the royal line, it's a sapling, or rather a clinging vine. If you dare to compare it to that great oak from which I descend, and my folk, I can trace my ancestry back to that one, Felix Brutus, our nation's first bright son. So don't bother me with this Johnny-come-lately and the rabble deceived so easily. I see him a mere boy ascend to the throne, sit there if it were truly his own. The crown practically slips off him to the ground, and in these royal robes he looks the clown. You say that I'm a rage? Well, I am. This boy has done nothing to deserve to stand in the place of his alleged father and greater men. Where once great Brutus founded a nation, now a fresh whelped mutt continues the degradation of our proud heritage, our proud name, and gone will be our worldwide fame. I said it once, I'll say it again, no man's bastard should be ever crowned king. Now when so many worthy lords bear the marks of heroic battles, braving every kind of dark danger that confronted good men, once giants walked this land, once warriors spent their lives in quest of the noble and true. Now we will be governed by foolish youth. Who is this Arthur? Why should he be king? Others more worthy among the living should receive the crown this afternoon. I'm not afraid to say it. My doom should have been to walk that aisle to lay claim to the crown of the nation Brutus named. My ancestor once was king, why not I? My lineage, all men can verify. My bravery in battle is well known, and my fame is continually grown, until the very heavens ring with my name. So why crown this Arthur? I lay the blame not on the silly bishop at his feast, nor on the people deceived at the least, into believing God's will can be known by a man pulling a sword from a stone. How absurd it must be for magic tricks to decide a nation's fate. Magic tricks cannot prove anything beyond the fact that men's minds are rarely ever intact when they go to church. They simply believe whatever lies they are urged to receive. But the real blame lies with Merlin, who made the magic the sword and its stone displayed. That crafty trickster, he stole the throne from men like me, whose worth is fully known. Listen to that rabble applaud their king. Listen, it makes my very heart ring with pain and grief to hear such disgusting honor being awarded to that boy. I can't remain here. The day's loss is joy for me, and I must seek out foreign lands, where all that men earn with their hands is not stolen from them by swords in a stone, or by men who live by magic alone. Let me ride far from this noise, far from a kingdom ruled by a boy. Let me go where men are still men, where honor lives and is honored again. Serious stuff, a comic interlude. One of the knights that almost never hear anybody write about is Sir Dinadan. He appears in Mallory. He's a companion of Lancelot. He's a bit of a jokester. And this is Sir Dinadan Goes A-Courting, and it was influenced by comic medieval ballads. And if it says anything about the poem, the first stanza came to me while I was driving on my way to church one Sunday morning. Sir Dinadan had a master plan of how to woo a wife. It would take work to find the love of his life. So he gathered friends and explained to them what he intended to do. My friends, he said, before I am dead, I desire a woman to woo. Let me explain. She must not be plain, nor a faded beauty. Brunette or blonde, of redheads I'm fond, as long as she knows her duty. I'm telling you, she won't be a shrew, for I abide none of that. As for her form, make sure she's warm, and not even a little fat. Like wind stirring chaff, his friends did laugh. Their mirth was unending. They knew the knight told tales all right and was fond of pretending. But Dinadan held up his hand and said, "I'm not joking. My life has seemed sad since no love I've had, and I feel like I'm broken. To become complete, I'll accomplish this feat, and I'll woo myself a wife." Then spoke Sir Gawain, "You should refrain from actions that'll ruin your life. Sure, women are fine, they're a hobby of mine, but be careful where you tread. If you choose one, you lose all your fun, you may as well be dead. My limited sauce blazes all night as long as you enjoy your fill. But just say I do. She'll rule over you, and soon you're over the hill." Number beyond all count. You've dated them all, from castle to hall, and your freedom you flaunt. You would be faithless of me to pursue 2 or 3, or like you, to gather a list of women I've dined that left behind, dropping every one I've kissed. You view love as sport, the highest in the court, but it's no casual game. For you rip apart each lady's heart, throwing mud on your good name. Sir Agravain, that annoying old pain, leaped to his brother's defense. "How dare you defame my brother's name? Have you lost all good sense? If he has all that done, it was all in fun, as befits a warrior's reward. The women he tasted, the ones he embraced, did not belong to his lord, unlike others in this room who chased their doom by pursuing their lord's wife." Gawain held up his hand, and Dinadan said, "Upon my life, I've never understood what shadows your mood to cause you, Sir Agravain, to harp again and again on a tale known to all men, which causes our king such pain. Back to the subject, friends, and let our debate end, for I mean to find me a wife. You may complain, but I won't refrain from seeking the love of my life. Don't try to dissuade me. I plan to leave quickly, and this I emphatically vow. I won't return here without a wife to cheer my honest warrior's brow." So Dinadan rode as he planned to go from the castle that day. He went many a mile, saw many a smile, but none caused him to stay. Though he long sought, even as he ought, for women so sweet, yet somehow he knew, this one's a shrew, that one has crooked feet. This barmaid is portly, the princess too courtly, the widowed duchess crosses her eyes. The farmer's daughter the pigs does slaughter, and the miller's girl has flabby thighs. Finally one eve, this knight grieved as he reached a distant inn. To the innkeeper he said, "I just want a bed, a place where I can begin to dream of seas I've crossed, what years I've lost on this miserable search. I made a rash vow I can't take back now for all the prayers in church." The innkeeper said, "I can give you a bed, but please first tell me why. A knight of your youth should in all truth talk like he wants to die." So the knight told his tale over a pint of good ale, and the host listened intently. At the story's end, he said, "My good friend, listen closely to me. There's one way to save the day and allow you to go home." He whispered in his ear what brought the knight good cheer, and he knew where he must go. So in a few days, after he rode a long ways, the court welcomed Sir Dinadan, who led forth a mare at which all did stare because it followed the man, who had not hedged, but rather had pledged he would return with a bride. But it was quickly known that the knight was alone, as no one the mare did ride. "On my good life, where's your wife?" mocked Sir Gawain. "You made a fuss and promised us you'd return a married man." "Oh, but I have a bride," the knight replied, "riding on that mare. The most beautiful queen man has ever seen." Sir Gawain did stare, but as hard as he tried, he could see no bride, just an empty saddle. "What's this, a joke?" Sir Gawain spoke, "or some kind of fiddle-faddle? You mean you can't see what's so plain to me? Then my good wife was right. She said that when unfaithful men looked, they would have no sight. For between ourselves, she was born of elves, and they are pure of heart. She can't be seen by libertines, or those who take the sinner's part." Sir Gawain was flustered, his wits he mustered, because he knew he was defeated. To preserve his pride, like a sheep he lied, and this is what he bleated. "Sir Dinadan, you're a happy man to have found such a beauteous wife. The smile on her face, her joy and her grace. I wish you both a wonderful life." Back to more serious stuff. Since someone here said that she liked villanelles, and she said, "You only have one villanelle?" So last week I wrote a second one. It's still kind of rough, but this is Galahad and the Grail. When Galahad arrived in Arthur's house, he sought the glory of the Holy Grail. His passion did the other knights arouse. To find the sacred prize they would soon joust, every man who stood alongside their trail. When Galahad arrived in Arthur's house, the other knights joined in Galahad's vows to pursue the cup of Christ and not fail. His passion did the other knights arouse, though their lives remained as filthy as sows, and most of them surely belonged in jail. When Galahad arrived at Arthur's house, he alone was worthy of sacred vows. He alone could achieve the Holy Grail. When Galahad arrived at Arthur's house, his passion did the other knights arouse. But of Arthur's quest, there were Bors and Percival as well, and this is Percival's search, a sonnet. For years I sought to be the most skilled knight, doing deeds in battle no man ever dreamed. Lancelot of France put my hopes to flight, as he proved the fighter I only seemed. Then I sought to be the best knight at love, and I wooed and besought a proud lady. But that field was too crowded, not enough the rewards, too many demands on me. At last I sought holiness, a hard road to journey, with a hidden destination, and the burden of sin a heavy load one cannot forget, despite salvation. Yet now with Galahad and Bors I stand, God's peace in my heart, the Grail in my hand. And,
10 minutes?
About 10 minutes, okay.
You have to do Mordred, I think.
I'm going to do Mordred, yeah. This one's called Lancelot and the Hermit. It's also one that I've been thinking about for months before I actually sat down in the last week or so to work on. This is rhyme dynamic pentameter, much like Rodolfo's complaint. Lancelot and the Hermit. Lancelot kneeled before the man of God and asked in a voice that rarely was awed, "Why can I not achieve the Holy Grail? In battle or tourney I never fail, but in this quest I have found all doors locked, and all my efforts by evils are blocked." The hermit looked upon the valiant knight and said, "This quest is no heroic fight, but it's only for those whose heart is pure." "What then," said Sir Lancelot, "is the cure for a heart which though stained seeks purity? What can I do of these stains to be free?" "Repentance," the wise man said, "and yet more repentance, until your heart keeps no score of rights and wrongs, for then you will live right." Thus he spoke to the grieving, kneeling knight. "I have repented time and time again," the knight replied, "but I cannot win the Sangreal, no matter how hard I try." And Lancelot uttered a loud cry, "Ah!" Repentance is not a means to an end, nor is God any byway. Don't pretend you can use the divine for your own goal. God alone is sufficient for your soul. "But the Grail," the knight begged, "how can I find this sign of God's presence that's on my mind?" "Beyond repentance lives true holiness, and that path demands utter faithfulness, not impure thoughts, no sins reserved in part, only a sincere seeking holy heart." The hermit then asked the knight, "Do you cling yet to any past sin whose sweetness stings your appetite or imagination?" Lancelot closed his eyes, had a notion of what the holy man said was indeed true, though his expression did not show a clue. He saw her face in his mind, Guinevere, the beauty, the grace which he held most dear. He did not speak his thoughts. There was no need, for the man of God saw the heart indeed and recognized what filled Lancelot's soul. "My son," he said, sorrowing, "this goal can never be achieved by any knight who pursues a sin as his true delight. If you cannot surrender this desire, if you burn with any forbidden fire, then your quest for this holiness will fail." Lancelot turned home, stopped seeking the Grail. With the grieving soul, a still yearning mind, he returned to Guinevere one more time. And that's taken from a scene that strikes me in the French romance, The Quest of the Holy Grail. It's one of the key moments in that, because Lancelot was originally supposed to be the Grail Knight, but he got sidetracked. And, Lancelot's banishment, which those of you who were at the English Department Chapel a couple weeks ago have heard. When Lancelot told Guinevere the news that he was no longer in love with her, she laughed. She was not to be so ill used by the one knight who had often amused, delighted, fascinated, romanced her. When Lancelot told Guinevere the news, her laughter changed into words that accused him of cheating on her. Not long after she laughed, she was not to be so ill used. Lancelot's honor she did much abuse in the hearts and minds of all who heard her. When Lancelot told Guinevere the news, he soon learned his friendship would be refused by those he had served as chief defender. She laughed, she was not to be so ill used, and provoked Arthur to make him pursue endless quests, not to return forever. When Lancelot told Guinevere the news, she laughed. She was not to be so ill used. On Guinevere's musings, a sonnet. She plucked some daisies from her garden, for she wanted to brighten her bedchamber, which had seemed so dark and cold, like her heart, sore from the absence of love that meant to her more than life, more than husband, more than love itself. But she would not admit her wrong, because she was Guinevere, above all talk of rights and wrongs. Still each night's long and empty passages chilled her soul, drove deep her fear of impending age, the lonely winding corners of past friendship steeped in her bitter, self-indulged, oft-brewed tea. Lancelot was gone, Lancelot was missed. Oh, that her love would return for a kiss. This one is another new poem. Sir Lamorak was one of the knights of the Round Table, a good knight, not the brightest. He was the lover of Queen Morgause, the sister of King Arthur, the mother of Gawain, Agravain, Gaheris, Gareth, and Mordred. And after her husband King Lot, died in a battle against Arthur, Lamorak, who was younger, pursued Morgause, and they became lovers. And this is called The Last Ride of Sir Lamorak, because one of the characteristics of all the lovers in the Arthurian stories, they all have unhappy endings. I think you'll figure out what the unhappy ending is here. The horse's hooves clip-clopped along the road as the brave knight daydreamed of his love, the fair Morgause, with whom he would be joined in only a few minutes. Her arms, oh, he could not begin to count their charms. Her face, oh, what wonders were there displayed. Her eyes, oh, what glories hid there disguised. Her nose, it was sweeter than the sweetest rose. Her lips, but he could not have tried to recount all the many wonders of his beloved and still fallen short of this total sum. Yet as he rode forth toward her castle, he made the effort as he dreamed of every moment of happiness they would enjoy over the coming weekend. Lamorak knew he was not the best, not the worthiest of Arthur's knights, yet the king's sister loved him. She loved him. She chose him above all other knights who had come a-courting when her husband, old King Lot, had in battle been slain. Sure, King Lot had fallen fighting against Arthur's rule, but Queen Morgause had never taken a side. She chose love over political intrigue. As she often told him when alone they shared love, you can't embrace an idea, or any man who has become only an idea. So she embraced Lamorak, who had no ideas other than fighting in battles and loving his lady. For him, conquests on the field and in chamber were enough, and he remembered his father's wise words the day he left his ancestral home to seek fame and glory and honor. My son, the good King Pellinore, declared, always be honest with your fellow knights, and when you must fight them, do so fairly, with honor, facing them man to man. Always treat ladies with all courtesy. Love one with all your heart, but honor all as sisters of your beloved. The king had paused there, and with a smile he whispered, and if you have the choice between ladies, between one who is a fair young beauty and another whose beauty has met age, choose the one with experience. For she will know your true value and not deceive you with pretensions of fidelity. She will remain loyal and true despite the arrival of any new suitors, and she will have learned it is far better to keep the love she has than to risk it pursuing a love that only may be. Contemplating his father's sage advice, the knight rode toward Lothian, unaware of anything besides his dreams of love. He did not see, ahead in the underbrush, the glint of Gawain's sword clenched in his hand. He did not hear Agravain's muttered curses, nor Gareth's drawn arrow, nor Gaheris shifting his feet as he waited to lunge forward in mortal combat. And the doomed knight never imagined the quiet footfalls of Mordred, quickly running behind him, preparing to thrust his treacherous sword. And that brings us to Mordred. Mordred is the villain, as you can all know. That will serve him! I will not let him rest a day in peace. War is my weapon, anarchy my goal. He fears I will steal his kingdom. Who the hell cares about a damned kingdom? I want him to suffer the absolute loss of everything he once dreamed. It's what he deserves for casting me aside, putting me up for adoption, calling me a damned bastard. Well, if I'm a bastard, he should know. If kings don't want to find their progeny crawling out of every hole to confront their native hypocrisy, then they should keep their tools safely stowed in their trousers. If anyone's a bastard, it's him. He's the one who couldn't produce a true heir by his own wife, so she turned to the arms of another man whose potency was sheathed for their protection. Their prohibited affair becomes another weapon I shall use to unseat his majesty. I care nothing for being king. Let them put an ass on the throne for all I care. If Caligula, my hero, made his horse a senator, then we can follow his lead and seat a braying beast of burden where my father once reigned. Father, ha! Other than burying his seed in my mother's too fertile ground, he fails to deserve that high title. No man I have ever met should ever be called father. None have earned that right. All are fools. He the greatest of all who believes in his own fatherhood. War. War is my weapon, anarchy my goal. I will rage until my eternal rage tears him from his throne and cast this whole damned world into a darkness as great as the one inside me. It's hard to get into character for that one. I have to think epics. I have to think Achilles. And I think I'm going to end with this one. I have a couple more that I might do, but I said no. I'll end with one that's it's a little more serious. It's maybe a little bit of a downer, but it's Arthur's Reflections Before Salisbury Plain. Salisbury Plain was the third of the three battles he and his army and Mordred's army fought, and it's the one at the end of which Mordred and Arthur mortally wound each other. And this is the night before, and I said it during winter because the end of the kingdom is the end of the year, and it's death and cold. And I think I was writing this one on, there were a couple of these poems I wrote in between classes when I was in the classroom and the computer was on and Word was open. And this was one of them, and it was a cold December day I was first drafting this. Arthur's Reflections Before Salisbury Plain. The wind whistled in the rafters, the fire glowed at his feet, the blanket pulled to chin because even though the flames danced and sparked, the king remained chilled deep into his soul. His beard long since whitened, his cheeks wrinkled, his forehead creased with deep lines. King Arthur pondered what had gone wrong, what he had done or left undone, which had ruined Logres. He sneezed, his sword-bearer brought to his nose a soft cloth. He tried to think, to recall what had led his army to march against Lancelot, what had caused Mordred to rise in revolt, what had led him to this house, this godforsaken ruin of a house in snow-swept Salisbury Plain, with only cold stone and horses to comfort the men, who longed for the warmth of their own home fires instead of huddling in shivering groups around open flames with the sharp wind threatened with extinction. But across the plain lay Mordred and his men, the ruthless, accursed, savage outlaws and scoundrels who had flocked to his summons, spurred by their greed and lust, which the king's bastard promised to assuage. The king's bastard? No. That phrase seemed too harsh for the only heir of King Arthur's flesh. If only he had not listened to what his counselors advised, if only he... But he had listened. He had abandoned the illegitimate, incestuous offspring which he unknowingly produced the one night in his life that he had sinned. Oh, there were other sins. Of that he had no doubt. But that one night he surrendered to passion and desire without asking the name of the woman with whom he strayed. If only he had asked. If only he had known. If only he... But life is not truly lived unless one regrets the mistakes of one's youth, and this was his. When he later discovered the child left for dead had indeed survived, and he had tried to make amends, to invite the young man to share in the bounty of the king's house. But from the first, Mordred had sulked each hour of each day, reminding his father he had been deprived of all this for so long. Arthur found his love repulsed, resented. And each day, slowly, the king found himself wishing Mordred were indeed dead, had died, was anywhere else but here in the court, the constant reminder of Arthur's sin. All this thinking caused the king to shiver again. It hurt like a sword through the chest to contemplate what had happened, but he was too weak to escape his past through ale, like so many of his men were that night. An old man huddled under wool blankets cannot outrun the blazing charge of thought, so he closed his eyes in hopes he would sleep. But his memories galloped on, mingled with fears for the morning when both armies would take the field and confront each other for the last time. It would be the last fight. He knew without consulting advisors. They would tell him what he already knew. He was tired, his men exhausted, the snow and wind weakening resolve on both sides. In the morning, he and Mordred would fight through the instruments of their two armies, and when the winds of war died, they would meet one final desperate time to the death. Arthur tightened his grip on the blanket. It was a cold night, but he could not rest. In the morning they would meet, father and insubordinate son, one last time. Before rejected love battled hatred, before the sin of the father would seek to absolve his existence in the blood of the father, a libation to gods today neither worshipped nor remembered. Arthur reached for his sword, the blanket slipped, and the chill crept forward into his soul. It was a cold night, but he could not rest.